Step forward, 2 steps back. All right, Daily Nation, and the headline is this: Raila down with, quote, bad flu. In an exclusive interview, he spoke to Karim Rajan, who is based in our Mombasa bureau, has been there for a long time, very familiar with a lot of these guys. So he has what is called institutional memory, and as it turns out, institutional connections. Sounding frail on an exclusive call with the Nation yesterday and appearing to breathe with slight difficulty, Azimio leader says he is on the road to full recovery after his no-show during anti-government protests on Wednesday and yesterday, and vows more protests against, quote, oppressive Ruto administration. Here is a quote: "I want to tell Kenyans that Baba is doing well. I was very sick from a terrible flu that left me bedridden and under the care of my doctor, but I am feeling much better now, and I'm confident I will be back on my feet soon." Several essentially continuing reports, or rather developing stories that have been developed from this main story. And we see here, I will not allow your sabotage. President William Ruto once again warns ODM chief Raila Odinga against plunging the country to chaos. Arrested leaders in court. Azimio politicians Babu Wino, Maina Njenga, Ken Chonga, among others, spent another night in custody. State to diplomats refrain from making, quote, inaccurate statements about the political situation in the country, CS Alfred Mutua tells envoys, and he is a Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary. Stop the Uhuru insults. Kikuyu elders want president's allies to stop attacks on the former head of state and his family, and they'll talk him out of supporting Azimio. Calm returns amid lukewarm protests. Businesses and schools reopened yesterday as Kenyans resumed normal life amid his chin in hand, and we'll get an explanation for the pose in a moment. But first, Kenyan passport climbs 6 positions in rankings. The Kenyan passport has improved 6 places in the global mobility ranking to position 67, up from 73rd place. It ranked in January, while moving 1 step up in the continent to occupy 7th place. Agriculture review mechanization strategy, tea firms told. President Ruto urges multinational companies to consider the issues raised by local leaders on behalf of residents who have been laid off due to technology. And court blocks courier plan to remove duty on cooking oil. The High Court has barred Treasury from implementing the proposal to remove 35% duty on refined edible oil. Trade CES Moses Kuria wanted the duty replaced with 10% export and investment promotion levy. At the very top here, and I will be flipping to page 10 to take a closer look at this a little later, but Ruto's plan B if courts block Finance Act. President William Ruto has lined up painful alternative tax measures that will enable his administration to plug revenue shortfalls resulting from the temporary suspension of the Finance Act 2023. Okay, let's take a look at it now. Page 10 of the Daily Nation here. There we go. This report by Brian Ambani, and the first few paragraphs read: President William Ruto has lined up painful. We've looked at that one. The Court of Appeal will on July 28th rule on whether to lift the suspension sought by Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u through Attorney General Justin Muturi. Professor Ndung'u argued that the freeze is affecting implementation of government operations and that the administration stands to lose 211 billion shillings in revenue in the current financial year. We're already familiar with that. But here we go. Here is the new information. Professor Ndung'u has, however, revealed to the IMF the contingency tax measures that the government is preparing to roll out to plug any deficits in revenue. A quote here: contingencies to contain the overall fiscal balance within available margins are appropriate. Financial year 2023-2024 revenue package in the draft finance bill will be critical to achieve the tax path envisioned under the program. And it continues to say one of the tax measures include introduction of a motor vehicle circulation tax. Countries that have implemented this tax have done so through an annual registration fee for vehicle owners to use public roads. And for more details, I will invite you to look at the story for yourself. You can find it on epaper.nation.africa. But at a glance, they tell us measures state plans to take to cover the deficit following the suspension of the implementation of the Finance Act. One, introduction of a motor vehicle circulation tax that would see vehicle owners pay an annual registration fee to use public roads. Two, reducing exemptions of some goods and services from paying VAT, as well as cutting exemptions on interest paid by the government. And there we have it. That's that particular report. Let's take a look at the front page of the Business Daily. Ruto plots new car tax. There it is again. This time it's the Business Daily is running with it. Penned by Patrick Alushula. Ruto plots new car tax, VAT, if court cripples Finance Act. Treasury to submit new package of taxes by end of October. Road tax calculated based on car value, engine and seating capacity. I'm curious what my panelists make of this. A sweet victory for Telkom as court orders state to pay 15 billion shillings. On the ticker, state sets up escrow account to deposit Gulf fuel deal billions. Kenya has set up an interest-bearing escrow account into which the proceeds from the sale of fuel sourced through the government-to-government deal are deposited in an effort to cushion itself from foreign exchange risk. Treasury suffers new setback in taxes implementation plan. Treasury suffered another setback in its quest to implement the contentious finance bill after the Court of Appeal declined to lift an order suspending the law. Pensions offered 770 billion shillings investments. Companies and funds have this year made pitches for investments worth 770 billion shillings to local pension funds, eyeing a slice of the capital that the schemes are allowed to invest into alternative asset classes. So that is the Business Daily. It flipped itself to page 2, an image there of Babu Owino at the Milimani Law Courts yesterday. Okay, let's take a look at Taifa Leo. Similar to what is on the front page of the Daily Nation, niliugua homa tu. Kinara wa Azimio Raila Odinga asema aliambukizwa flu ndiposa akakosa maandamano. Kinara wa muungano wa Azimio la Umoja wa Kenya Bwana Raila Odinga amefichua kuwa alikuwa amelazwa hospitalini baada ya kupotea siku ya kwanza ya maandamano Jumatano. Kwenye mahojiano ya kipekee jana na Taifa Leo, Bwana Odinga alisema aliambukizwa homa kali siku chache zilizopita ndiposa hajakuwa akionekana hadharani. And a quote there on the front page. Ninataka Wakenya wajue kwamba maandamano si ya Baba Martha Karua wala Kalonzo Musyoka, yanahusu Wakenya ambao wanapinga gharama ya juu ya maisha na ushuru wa juu. And on the side here, koti yazima utekelezaji wa sheria tata. Jopo la majaji watatu wa koti ya rufaa sasa kutoa uamuzi wake kuhusu kesi hiyo. Ruto aingilia mzozo wa mashinani. Ruto aingilia mzozo wa mashinani za chai. I beg your pardon. Ruto aingilia mzozo wa mashini za chai. Ahimiza wamiliki wa kampuni za majani chai let me just read from my hard copy here. Kuzingatia maoni ya viongozi wa Kericho. And further down here, dereva wa lori lililoua watu 53 kuzuiliwa. And huyu ni ule raia wa Rwanda na amesalia rumande hadi kesi dhidi yake isikizwe na kuamuliwa. Okay, so that is the Taifa Leo. Let's see the Standard. Front page of the Standard. Headline, calm returns as focus now shifts to police action. Protest hotspots witnessed relative calm yesterday, with Azimio leaders failing yet again to show up, but insisting demos will go on even as Kenyans counted the cost, with rights groups decrying police brutality. It is a conversation we had yesterday on AM Live. Should you wish to view it, if you missed it, you can find it on our NTV Kenya YouTube channel. At a glance, most parts of the country return to normalcy as intensity of protests died down. Rights groups accuse police of brutality, claim existence of a killer squad. President says elected leaders will lead country, not fierce protests. Opposition vows demos to go on. Shows that Raila Odinga inset is safe. Children in protest hotspots except in Nyanza region resume learning. Businesses cautiously reopen as previously empty streets come back to life. Hopefully those children in the Nyanza region will go back to school. Children walk home from school near Mathare in Nairobi yesterday. An uneasy calm returned to the area after Wednesday's demonstrations in which some protesters sustained gunshot wounds and several others arrested. Okay, let's take a look now at what is at the very top here. And good news for students on varsity cutoff. Talks on use of tea harvesting machines stall, and keep your gun goes for another world record. So there it is. That is the standard. Let's take a look at the Star. Here we go. Ruto, Raila take political battle to world powers. Both sides seek to sway international community on, quote, truth of chaos. Babuino charged as normalcy returns in the city. An image of him and his co-accused there at the Milimani Law Courts. The front page shared, that image shares the front page with another image. Hawkers sell clothes on Kirinyaga Road as normalcy returned to the Nairobi CBD on Thursday. And on the side here, several stories highlighted. Obado wanted Sharon to abort his baby. Mom, Sharon Otieno's mother, yesterday told a Nairobi court that former Migori Governor Okoth Obado was initially not comfortable with Sharon carrying his child and that he had dished out 30,000 shillings for her to terminate the pregnancy. Sex for jobs relief for tea companies as market ban lifted. Multinational tea firms James Finley's and Ekaterra can now resume the sale of their products in international markets after the suspension of their certificates was lifted. And farther down, Kilifi chief officer stabbed to death by her house help. Kilifi County Chief Officer for Fisheries and Blue Economy Rahab Karisa was yesterday found dead in her house in Kilifi. A quarrel with, after following, I assume is what they meant, following a quarrel with the house help. Police said the maid vanished and a hunt for her has been launched. There we go, front page of the Star. As for the Siasa pullout, inside vicious battle in Azimio to succeed Raila Odinga. So they're looking at the Raila succession. People daily now. And calm returns amid queries over Raila. Protests, businesses resume, MPs seized over demos remain in custody, even as questions emerge on the whereabouts of the Azimio top luminaries. Raila Odinga addressed at least his absence from the demonstration stage. The image here is of hawkers going about their business on Nairobi's Moi Avenue as uneasy normalcy returned after days of tension triggered by the Azimio protests. This shares a front page with doping, the ticking time bomb for Kenya's athletics. Let me quickly make mention of the East African. The Sudan, Save Sudan. We had a headline yesterday, let's save our country. ICC has started a probe into war crimes and crimes against humanity as horrors emerge from Darfur. Overlapping peace processes have barely produced results, and neighbors are worried of a full-scale civil war that will increase their refugee burden and security threats. An image of the two at loggerheads there on the front page. Sudan's army chief and his rival there. Uhuru's tough assignment in the DR Congo's peace. EAC is banking on the former Kenyan president to return the warring parties to dialogue. Kenya loses $21 billion on demo day as NSC activity dips. President Ruto is under pressure to save economy as rival sides dig in row over cost of living. And at the very top here, a stitch in time for East African textile sector and several other stories contained within the East African highlighted on the front page there. Okay, we have now also been joined by Nurdin Hagai, and just want to get some of your thoughts on the headline stories. But a reminder of what we're discussing. Is it a case of one step forward, two steps back? How has Kenya's democracy evolved? I have already introduced Victor Marende, anthropologist. He has attempted to give us the definition of what an anthropologist is. We now have an advocate of the High Court, Nuruddin Hagai. I am now waiting for advice. Mundalo, National Youth Chair, Jubilee, and Ascon Kamili Youth Policy Analyst.
Only so that
Victor.
I'm not mistaken to be attempting to
no,
define my discipline.
It was on our light. It was on our light. I'm curious what you make of the assessment that an uneasy calm has returned to the country. Has that been your experience, Nuruddin?
Well, things are a bit moving because we can see compared to Wednesday, most people rather stayed home and there was not much traffic, either human or vehicles. People are trying to go out, because you see staying indoors 3 days is really hard, because there are those who actually make a living, a courtesy of being out there day to day, and there are those who work, who are employed, and there's no employer who will pay you for 3 days while you stay at home. And as much as we say we work from home, not everybody can work from home. So people are trying to make a living. That's what is happening, and it's not bad, it's commendable. Because at the end of the day, as politicians do their politics, we also have to live our lives. Sad reality is that their politics always spills over to our lives, and we end up having issues of arbitrary arrests. We're talking about how we know the politicians were arrested, but who knows about the 300 or 400 young men and women who have been arrested and where they are. And that is quite sad, because you just arrest people. And I remember the last time they were in court, they took 73 people to court. And the DPP ended up saying that they have no charges against those people and they were left to go home. So, you know, in as much as you're making arrests, let them not be arbitrary. And if you arrest me in jurisdiction X, try me in that jurisdiction, or you take me to a different jurisdiction. Unless whatever you're trying to do, you're taking us back to the old days. And you know, as Swedish House Mafia says, those days are gone and the memories are on the wall now. And we can't go back to that.
I love how you quote lyrics. All right, Victor, your thoughts? The assessment that an uneasy calm has returned. Actually, yesterday when I was in studio at about 9 p.m., markets were open in Kisii. Sydney Chazima was speaking to traders as well, but that was during what we call the Kiswahili block. That was between 1 and 2 p.m. And then we did interviews in Nakuru, children back to school. Same thing in Mombasa, relative calm. The only situation which seems tenuous is in Kisumu, because if you look at the front page of the Star, where we had, is it the Star where we had the school children? No, Standard. It's only there that schools were told yesterday, but Bayoko Kusa remained closed. First of all, why do you think this uneasy, quote, not my words, but it's been used across the dailies, right? An easy calm has returned. Is it, as Nuruddin Hagai is saying, yo, people have to earn a living?
I wouldn't put it as people have to earn a living. The economy is hurting. So the common man on the ground is asking himself hard questions, to stay at home or not to stay. And you'd realize that they choose not to stay. But then as they come to the streets, it begs the question, are we willing to sustain them on those streets so that they can earn what they must earn? So it's not a relative calm. It is Kenyans doing what they must do to survive.
It is Kenyans doing what they must do. You're saying it is not a relative calm? Interesting assessment, that. What about Nuruddin, missing in action? Raila Odinga, People Daily have posed the question. They say calm returns amid queries over Raila, but then the Daily Nation tells us on the front page, I had flipped to that story of Ruto's plan B, should the Finance Act remain suspended. But here it is, Raila down with bad flu. Taifa Leo puts it this way, niliugua homa tu.
Well, you see, he has been saying that this is not about Raila Odinga. It's about the cost of living and taxes. So if that is the case, then he doesn't really need to be there. But you see, there's obsession of the one who calls for something must always be there. And that is why people are wondering where he is. We've seen those who are in government, courtesy of a certain amorphous group called an intelligence bureau that has posted where they have been. That is okay, but they also need to be alive to the fact that there's a Data Protection Act that is in place, and someone can sue you for for posting certain things, you know, at the end of the day. I believe the fact that his members of parliament have been arrested, a couple of them, and I think the latest one is Olongo Oluoch, if I'm not wrong. That shows you the fact that the government is trying to stop the protests that are going on, and they feel that the fact that he's not there, it's easy to deal with those members of parliament. He has said he's down with a flu and he'll be back, so we don't know when back is, and we don't know if we are going back to another 2 days of work in a week, next week. Only he knows. We just hope and pray that these issues are resolved so that people can revert back their lives, because at the end of the day, in as much as he wants a protest, there are issues that he's complaining about that are actually pertinent to the people, like the cost of living, like the issues of the government being people-centric in whatever it does, which actually makes sense. So if the government would actually just work on what the people want, then it removes the spark from his maandamano, and he's left with talking about a server, which most won't relate to, unless those who are suicidal supporters. But at the end of the day, if the government doesn't work on the things like cost of living, believe you me, we'll have a situation where people always feel agitated, people will be angry, and they'll feel like their own government, that some who even voted for it, they feel like they're no longer part of it. So the government is in between a rock and a tight place, and I hope they wake up, because the fact that they have returned to campaigns, that doesn't solve the issue. And talking about Raila left, right, and center doesn't solve the issue of cost of living. So just work on what the people want and let Raila be Raila, because you know he's an opposition leader, and in everything he does is politics. And 4 years is a long time. You have to be relevant. So if you give him space, he'll pick what you're not doing. If people are complaining about a particular issue, he'll use it to his advantage, and that is what the deputy president then, who's the president now, used to do. He acted as a deputy president under the law, but an opposition leader in action. So whatever was wrong, he would use that in his campaigns, and that's what Raila is doing right now. So he just has to understand that to remove that spark from Raila, just attack what the people want, the necessities. If you work on that, then you make him irrelevant. But if you focus on him and not what the people want, then you're making him larger than life, more than he already is. And that doesn't stem well for someone who has told us or has shown that he's seeking re-election, which, and 4 years is just down the line with a manifesto that you're yet to implement. Okay. So we wait to see how this boils over, but at the end of the day, we just hope and pray that the arbitrary arrests stop, because now we're seeing cops who are acting like garage men, like hardware men. You don't know who you're talking to. And are we going back to the days where you can't be comfortable enough to even critique your own government, in that you're careful of your surrounding? Now that talks about the topic of today, yes, which we should never allow ourselves to go back to the dark days, unless now we are talking about how we are going to, it's like suspend the constitution. You know, we have rights and freedoms, so like our speech. Just the fact that African leaders love to be praised, or rather hero worship, doesn't mean we worship you when you're going wrong. And at the end of the day, when you're wrong, you're wrong. In as much as you might control agencies, which is absurd, because the constitution envisages a police service that is independent. And I guess the word there, the independent in I, is silent. That's why they act the way they act, which is sad.
You know, in the report yesterday by Brian Obuya, which, as I mentioned, you can find on the NTV Kenya YouTube channel, he did say this is something that even went on during the Uhuru Kenyatta administration, you know. So but we'll look into that evolution, because as you said, it falls within the remit of the topic of conversation. How has Kenya's democracy evolved? Tweet me at Obarrows or at NTV Kenya with your thoughts. Is it a case of 1 step forward, 2 steps back? I'll also check out Facebook and see if there are any comments on there. But when we come back, Victor, the no-show of by these leaders, is it a case of them afraid that they'll end up, you know, handcuffed behind bars on the other side?